Hello and welcome to Structure and Flow. I'm Dr. Minette Riordan here with the fabulous Brad Dobson. We are the co-founders of the Path to Profit Academy and the host of the Structure and Flow podcast, where we bring you great details, information, and a lot of ramblings and musings about topics related to structure and flow.
But we're productive doing it. It's about productivity.
It is about productivity, and it's about productivity and creativity, and it's about the tension between the two of them and why there seems to be this myth that creatives aren't productive. I think we just do productivity a little bit differently than other people.
And we're really going to dive into that deeply today, talking about a structured life and just what it means to live a structured life and how that might make you feel really bad as a creative, or make you think that it sounds terrible, and how it can have a profound impact on your productivity. So this is episode 114, 3 benefits of living a well-structured life.
And I'm kind of obsessed with this topic right now, of the well-structured life, the intentional life, the well-built, well-designed. We've talked in other episodes a little bit about this. This may be a little more of a philosophical episode than a practical how-to episode. But I think at the end, you'll be able to determine, do you need more structure in your life or not? Which leads right into our quote for the day, which is from Robert Fulghum. And he writes, "Habits are sacred because they give deliberate structure to our lives. Structure gives us a sense of security. And that sense of security is the ground of meaning."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I get that. And I think it's funny that you're talking about how you're obsessed with it right now. And I think in my own way, I am as well. I'm looking at things like a personal maintenance schedule for maintaining things, everything, whether it's in the business, on my person, or around the house.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that without structure, maybe I just realized late in the game, that really needs to get done, as opposed to having the structure that says, yeah, you really should maybe clean the air filters at this point.
And like your car makes it really easy because you get something that pops up and says, hey, it's time for that oil change, or they put the little sticker up in the corner of the window where you're constantly reminded that you're getting closer and closer to the moment when you need to take it into the shop. And we have a Toyota, and so we get an email that says it's time for maintenance. So there's external things in place that hold us accountable to getting these things done. And for most of us who are business owners, we don't have that external accountability. And one of the reasons so many of us love working for ourselves is actually the lack of accountability and having more freedom and flexibility.
Yeah, let's go to Starbucks right now, maybe in the middle of the podcast.
Yeah, Starbucks. Don't get me started until, yes.
Or the beach.
Or the beach. Yes, we could do both.
Exactly.
Get our Starbucks and go to the beach. So we have the flexibility and luxury to do that. And on occasion, we do that. And it's usually intentional. Even that is intentional. And it usually falls on a day where we have some creative work that we know we could do, whether we were sitting at Starbucks or at the beach. But the reason why I think I'm feeling so obsessed with this idea of the well-structured life is that when you have a well-structured life, it's the one that supports your best self and allows you to really optimize your time so that you're doing your best work. And I think this is what we want to get to in regards to productivity and creativity. Productivity is not about doing more, just more and more and more for the sake of doing more. Productivity is having the intention of doing your best work, and it requires focus and it requires structure. And yet, in all honesty, it's easy for me to resist a structure that someone else places on me.
And it's funny too, and I'm thinking about something you had in the notes and something that I saw in the articles that we'll have links to from this episode. For those of you who are parents,
yes,
many of you will remember how much your children craved structure. Now, that might not be just time structure, but typically, they want to eat on a schedule. They want to go to bed on a schedule. They want to have their nap time on a schedule. They want to, but they also want the structure of love and support from their parents or the structure of friends and those types of things. And
boundaries, it's clear boundaries of what's normal, acceptable.
Right.
And that if they push the boundaries and you bounce back, that the boundaries aren't flexible.
Yeah, we always found that any major change, for instance, going on vacation or the end of school or whatever it was a 2-week horror period.
Yeah, readjusting.
Right, until they got back onto a schedule. And it was, but everything flowed so smoothly when they were on a schedule. Now, Of course, everybody's kids have their ups and downs, but without that schedule, they were a mess.
Yeah, and imagine what it's like every day when you have no boundaries, no structure, no schedule. Your life may be a mess as well. I find that I am happier when I have a cadence and a rhythm to my days. So if we think of structure as a loose container rather than as a forced structure of time, but more, this is what really matters to get done today. It doesn't matter the order that it gets done, but these are the things I commit to do today that are going to help me feel awesome and amazing. So when I think about structure, I don't want to think about it being restrictive. I think this is where we get caught up in this tension.
Right. It doesn't have to happen at 9:15 a.m.
That's right. And so this is the whole point of the show, is to help you understand how structure supports flow. It doesn't contain flow or reduce or restrict flow, but it actually creates the opportunity for more flow. And so I want to talk about what can possibly happen, or some of the signs that you might be seeing when you're not living a structured life.
Yeah, one that was interesting when I went through those articles was a messy house or a messy room. Is that
been there, done that?
Yeah, right. Is that a lot of times that's an indication of perhaps an unstructured life flowing out of you. I don't know if I said that right, but it was an interesting comment.
Yeah, well, one of the articles had 10 ways to know if you need more structure in your life. And they were things like you talk a lot and don't actually take action, or you're not doing your best work. You're doing the bare minimum to get by, which was totally me in college. I was great at just kind of doing the bare minimum. The first time being out on my own, not having structure, all of a sudden, I had 3 classes a week instead of, my days being full of classes. So there's a lot of things that can happen. Also that you miss things and forget things because you're trying to hold too much in your head. That's another sign of needing structure. And I've certainly been particularly guilty of that, of trying to hold too much in my mind and not keep track of it. But there's a great quote from a guy named Dr. Olson, and I love his definition of structure. He talks about structure as a way of gaining control over oneself and one's environment. He says that structure saves time and brings order. Like habit and routine, it frees the mind of clutter. When structure breaks down, we get easily overwhelmed, and worry stands in the way of productive action.
Right. So once again, we've talked about this before, where you're forcing your brain to make all these little micro decisions about things that you really didn't need to spend time worrying about. With just a little bit of structure in place, you could have avoided that, and with that, then flowed into more creativity and more productivity.
So one of the 3 benefits of living a well-structured life is you don't feel overwhelmed or chaotic or out of control. You actually feel safe inside the boundaries of your structure. And inside those boundaries, you have a lot of freedom and a lot of flow. There's actually a myth that creatives need massive myth that creatives need a massive amount of flow, and we need reasonable amounts of flow. And yet, remember, we've talked on the show before, I think, about the principle of creative constraints, that we're actually more creative when we have constraints. And so think about that on a day-to-day basis. And it makes me think about this idea of morning routines. There have been so many books and articles written on the routines of famous CEOs or the routines of the rich and famous people. There's all these things about how essential having a morning routine is to starting your day off right. And a morning routine is a great example of a structure. And inside that structure, there's usually beautiful flow. Like I'm really happy with my morning routine most of the time. So right now, that morning routine looks like I get up, I make coffee, I sit down, I do some reading or studying, and forgot to turn my email off. So it's binging in the background while we're recording the podcast. So morning routine, have some coffee. I do some reading or studying. I might give myself 5 or 10 minutes while I wake up to surf social media a little bit, but no more than that. By the time I'm done with my coffee and a little reading, I get a walk in and maybe do some journaling or some art. So there's a whole lot that happens for me before I sit down to my desk to go to work. And the biggest impact that I see is in my mindset for the day. So this morning in particular, we know we have a busy day. We needed to get a couple of podcasts recorded. We're getting ready to go on vacation. And there was this little bit of sense of chaos because I hadn't finished doing some of the prep work. And the structures are in place to not have that chaos. And I don't like my days to start from a feeling of where I'm scrambling and I'm behind the 8 ball instead of really in control.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you went with the morning stuff. And obviously it's crucial, and it sets you up for performing
for me.
Yeah, for performing better throughout the day. I think a lot of times I run into structure problems in the afternoons when in the mornings I can get up and go, but sometimes when there's a loose structure about an afternoon, I tend to get off track and not get back on track. It's easy to just kind of lose any impetus to do things because I don't have some sort of structure around that. I think we're saying the word structure too much. We should come up with a different word for this.
Well, I think it's for me, it is flow. It's like, how do you want your day to flow? How it's what we've talked about before with the time blocks and the focus blocks. And, it's using the timer on your phone to remind you to stand up and take a break. That's an example of creating systems throughout the day that support you in moving forward with your priorities. And I want to shift for a minute and just talk about what happens in your business when you don't have clear systems in place. I won't use the structure word, but when you don't have clear containers and priorities in place, is that you feel, again, super overwhelmed. You don't make progress towards your goals. You don't make as much money as you want to make because you're not completing projects or getting a new piece of art or a new play or a new video up for your Patreon account. So when there's no visible deadlines in place or no containers for getting work completed, it has a huge impact on your productivity. And when it impacts your productivity, the after effect of that is your mindset. Then all of a sudden you either feel guilty or you go into shame and blame and you start to look at, I suck at business, I'm not making any money, this isn't going to work, I'm going to have to go back and get a job. When the truth is, if you just take a deep breath and back up for a minute and look at what are the goals that you've set for yourself, and are you staying on track, and are you setting deadlines that are doable and achievable? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of our strategies. I'm going to tell you how to create a well-structured life here in a few minutes.
It's interesting along those lines, or what's coming out of this for me is that some of the things we work with our clients on in terms of setting up a visual business plan, in terms of going through a core values exercise, those really represent living a well-structured life. So this isn't all about how you respond to different times during the day. Structure or container, as Manette said, can come in different forms. Yeah. So being able to make decisions in the context of having well-stated and well-understood core values is providing yourself with a well-structured life or business.
Yeah.
Similarly for a business plan that you have set out in front of you, or a project definition or anything like that. But so it's not just about time. It's about having those structures that you can, and providing yourself with a context that you can make decisions about time with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it connects back to that idea of knowing your big why. And when it comes to building your own business, we're big fans of making sure that you understand what's the impact that you want to have. And that well-structured life for me is one that's full of meaning and purpose. So it's not just the consistency and the deadlines and the goals. All those things are useful and valuable, but they're only useful and valuable within the context of, are you doing work that you love? Are you doing work that's on purpose? And if you don't have some of these foundational structures in place, the progress is going to be slow. It is going to impact productivity. And you can't be creative when you're in a place of overwhelm, when you're scrambling or chaotic, or you're always procrastinating and working at the last second on deadlines. This impacts productivity. Flow works when it's calm, when there's downtime, when there's breathing space, when there's gentle movement, and when there's not this feeling of rushing and having to get it done right now. So it's super important that well-structured life. So I love that Brad said that. So we've looked at, there's the emotional impact of not having a well-structured life. When it is the physical structure and container, the calendar, the planner, it improves your mindset and improves your productivity. Strategically, it improves your profits. It helps you grow your business.
Oh, sure. But
then also the third benefit, I think, is clarity. Is when you have a well-structured life sort of rests on this, space of, I know who I am, I know what I value, I know what I'm doing, who I'm doing it for, and why I'm doing it.
And where you're going.
In terms
of the visualizations that we talked about.
Who, what, the who, what, and why piece isn't just about your clients, it's about your family and your friends and your spouse and your pets. For those of you, I'm totally been obsessed with all the little baby happy goats lately.
Oh, Lord.
In our Productivity for Creative Entrepreneurs Facebook group, I posted one of these baby goats doing his happy dance. Oh my gosh, it's the most hilarious thing, right? And it's just these moments.
But do you think that goat had structure around him? He was happier because he didn't have structure around him.
No, he had a bottle right beside him. He was a tiny little goat, but he was in a pen.
He felt safe.
He felt totally safe inside his structure to be really happy. And it's just like kids. Another great example of that is the kid who goes down the slide at the playground and they fall off the end and bonk their head. Mm-hmm. And it happens and it's so painful to watch. And they stand up and they look around. If they see mom, or dad, they burst into tears because the safe place is there. But guess what? If they don't see mom or dad and they don't see somebody going, are you okay? Then guess what? They shake it off and they go back to play. Right. And so it's noticing how these containers create safe places for us to be more expressive and more authentic and to live that meaningful life.
Interesting. So at some level, and I remember this also from the articles, at some level, if you're not living a well-structured life and perhaps there's some chaos in your life, you're not providing yourself, whoever defines you, with a safe place to do your best work. Yeah. So that's a safety thing to a certain extent.
It is. Yeah. Structure has a lot to do, and systems have a lot to do with freedom. And yet we think it's about control. We think it's about people telling us when to do something. And trust me, Brad and I have done a lot of our own emotional growth and personal development work around our inner rebel saying, don't you tell me what to do. It's so easy. And having both worked in jobs where, you get told what to do. We watched our son have this experience of having his first summer job and, chafing a little bit under the restrictions being put on what he could or couldn't do in the job. And this is a part of the learning process that we go through as adults. But as entrepreneurs, as creative business owners, we're doing this so that we can have the freedom. Freedom doesn't mean lack of structure, right? Freedom means control and it means choice. And so
it means freedom from fear, though, is kind of what we're getting at. Right?
Well, I don't know. Being a business owner has lots of other fears.
Well, this is true.
But what it doesn't have is someone else, it's not the giant hand coming down on top of you saying, you're going to work this way or leave.
Right.
And it's freedom from some of the pressure of deadlines. Mm-hmm. But even when I owned a publishing company and I was printing a magazine, every single month, there was huge amount of pressure and deadlines, but they were pressure and deadlines of my own choosing. It was my company. So just noticing, what is your relationship with structure? Does this whole conversation like piss you off? And you're like, I don't need structure. Does this whole conversation really connect with your inner rebel? And you're going, I don't need structure. I can't be creative when I have structure. And the other myth about this whole concept of the need for creative time, if you read any of the great artists, and especially so many of the great writers, they talk about how creativity is an intentional habit. Well, so is business, and so is structure, and so is building a well-structured, meaningful life. It's putting habits into place, like Brad said, that minimize distractions and minimize that decision-making power and create freedom, right? Boundaries actually make us feel really safe. So I promised you this was going to be a little more of a philosophical conversation, but I think it's something that we were missing a decade ago.
Sure.
When we were both working full time, we were raising young kids.
Well, to a certain extent, you're the tail and not the tiger in that case, right?
Yeah.
You have a full-time job and you're told what to do in that, and you come home and you have 2 kids and it's clear what you need to do there, and then you got house maintenance and it's clear what you need to do there, and after that there's no other time. So
yeah. And it's not the life that we personally would have chosen for ourselves, but we found ourselves in that place, and it's been a decade journey to getting our life to where it really is well structured. And yet even inside of this, there's room for more. Like Brad talked about the personal maintenance schedule for things, little small things around the house, having a regular schedule for checking the fire detectors so that they don't wake you up at 3:00 in the morning with the dead batteries going beep, beep. It's small things that make a huge difference. And it's easy to get stuck in habits. In fact, I talked to a lady on the phone yesterday, and we were talking about, she's like, I don't know why I can't, make a habit of exercise and fitness and getting this going. And so we were really digging into what were the stories she was telling herself around fitness and when she could walk, and, if it's this temperature, I can't possibly go out, or it's too late now, I can't go, or I have too many appointments today. And we tend to make a lot of stories around why we can't do things. And so part of this is very much that internal reflection on what's our resistance to structure.
There's always something like that. So how can we design a well-structured life?
I think you have to practice. I think we've been for the last year, I think, in a place where we're practicing. So as creatives, we don't like to be told what to do. No. As independent adults, we don't like to be told what to do. So I'm not telling you at all what your routine should look like. I am suggesting you try some routines on, and that you see what fits and what's a match and what improves your flexibility. One of the things I was talking about with another one of my clients this week is, she's like, I'm paying attention to my energy throughout the day so that I make sure that I'm most effective in doing some of those harder tasks or some of the more creative tasks when I have the most energy. So it's learning to match routines with energy, and it's learning to prioritize what's most important. So that's part of it. I know you want to talk about the SMART goals. You like the SMART goals.
SMART goals? Sorry, my mind has just gone. It took a break.
You mean I was just talking on and on and on and you totally zoned me out?
I don't know. My head went somewhere else. Clearly not a productive moment. SMART goals are just, you've probably heard of them. You've heard us talk about them. It's a classic statement in terms of things that are achievable, time specific, and
specific, measurable, actionable, results-oriented, and time-oriented.
Right. So clearly that's a lot different than your New Year's resolution, which is, I'm going to lose 50 pounds and I'm going to go to the gym every day. And so these are things more like for those of you who have done Couch to 5K, you might have heard of that, where it's a program that will take you from the couch to being able to finish a 5K, your neighborhood 5K race. And that's the way you should approach things. Start small. A Couch to 5K program will typically just get you out the door for half an hour of walking and maybe 1 minute of running to start. And it will slowly progress you through a little bit more running each week or each month. You can take it whatever progress you want. But
I love how many sports analogies are like exactly the same for business.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean, so many of the things that they teach you about training, about weight loss, right? They all apply.
So something like that that's achievable, right? Where you can actually, it's not something that's hard to do. You can do it, you can get used to doing it, and then you can level up a little bit.
And the timelines are reasonable that I think this is, we talked in, I don't know, the last episode or the one before that, I can't remember now, but we just talked about timelines and how timelines can help you manage that sense of possibility.
Yep. Just another framework around things to put things in context.
Yeah.
Right?
And every single aspect of your business deserves your time and attention, and every single aspect of your life does as well. So I could replace the word structure with intention and to say living an intentional life. And for me, an intentional life is one where I'm present, where I'm paying attention, where I'm not just letting time pass by. There's some weeks that seem full and busy and kind of crazy, and all of a sudden you get to Friday and you're like, where did the time go? For me, that's not intentional living. I get off my routines. That's not intentional living. If I'm not making time to be creative, I'm not living intentionally. If I'm not spending time with my daughter, who's coming home on Saturday after being gone all summer, we can't wait to see her. So for me, being very intentional with how I'm spending my time and also where I'm putting my attention, right? And so I think intentional living maybe is a different way of looking at structure.
Yeah, that's a great word, and it's also in opposition to living in chaos.
Yes.
Whether you're living in, it's hard to live in chaos intentionally.
Yeah.
There are very few people that actually crave that. More power to you if you're that person. I love that though. Intention, a well-intentioned life is a similar type of thing.
Yeah, we could change the name of the whole podcast.
No, I think we're good. We don't need to change again.
So this is how our creative brains think here.
Right.
So just to kind of recap, why should you even consider living a well-structured or well-intentioned life? Because it eliminates overwhelm. It increases productivity. It actually allows for more flow. And it works best when it's created on a foundation that is grounded in your core values and in your vision and in your mission. And it's really important to look at what it is that you want to accomplish and create a plan for getting there. And underneath all of that, just bringing this idea of intention and mindfulness to the act of building a creative business is a game changer from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. I think the final thing I would say about that is consistency, and that mindfulness practice of seeing what you're doing, seeing your intention, and doing it over and over and over again is where things are going to work. Yeah. But you have to be prepared to commit and be consistent.
And then tracking when it's not working, why not? To be willing to have some of those difficult conversations with yourself about what's not working, which leads me right into what we're going to talk about on the next show, which I know is going to be a hot, juicy topic. We're going to talk about procrastination. What are the causes, symptoms, and what's the psychology behind why we procrastinate? And oftentimes creatives are accused of being procrastinators, and that's not always the case. So we're going to dig into issues around procrastination.
I'm not an amateur procrastinator. I'm a procrastinator.
You're a professional procrastinator.
Cool. All righty. Have fun and live that well-intentioned, well-structured life.
Amen.